We have something special for you in the show right now, but we begin with some context. These public impeachment hearings that launched today, they broke through literally as networks broadcast hours of this new testimony, driving attention to this story. Many Americans zooming in on this for the first time. In fact, I can tell you earlier today, all 5 of the top Google searches in the entire country were about this story, not the things they're usually about. And viewers who were looking for typical daytime talk shows were greeted by what you see on your screen. Every news network's all-star team as these hearings got into gear. Then viewers were presented with perhaps the only figures more obscure than mid-level diplomats, staff attorneys for the House Intelligence Committee, former prosecutor Daniel Goldman for the Democrats, and Steve Castor for the Republicans, a veteran of Benghazi. Both going on before most of their political congressional bosses on the committee, and they offered sharp prosecutorial inquisitions. That's different from virtually all other hearings. But this prosecution mode actually follows the Constitution, which treats impeachment as the U.S. government's way to decide, if it must, whether to essentially indict a president. Well, indict a president for what? Bribery is one theory of the case. Goldman even pressing the witness on how sometimes a criminal may tell co-conspirators, there's no crime here, repeating those words regardless of the facts and the action.
Even though President Trump was saying repeatedly that there is no quid pro quo, Ambassador Sondland relayed to you that the facts of the matter were that the White House meeting and the security assistance were conditioned on the announcement of these investigations. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding.
Good question. You know, Democrats tapped Goldman just this year in case impeachment heated up. He cut his teeth as a federal prosecutor in New York, trying defendants like the crime boss of the Genovese crime family and Russian gangsters, the kind of cases that sharpen the nation's elite prosecutors. Not unlike another one you've probably heard of in the Trump era, Andrew Weissmann, who also prosecuted the Genovese crime family boss and won the conviction against Paul Manafort as a prosecutor in the Mueller probe, earning praise for his results from many legal experts, and also, because we tell you the whole story here, also drawing scorn from Trump allies.
Andrew Weissmann, the prosecutor thug under Mueller.
I've called Mr. Weissmann the poster boy for prosecutorial misconduct.
He has chosen his Jack the Ripper-like leader, Andrew Weissmann.
Guess what? Weissmann is a legal nightmare. Weissmann, guess what? He's a legal tyrant.
That prosecutor, a veteran of the Mueller probe, the Enron task force, and the Eastern District of New York, the former head of the fraud section at the Justice Department, Andrew Weissmann, joins me for his first ever appearance on The Beat. We also want to welcome him as an NBC News and MSNBC legal analyst. Appreciate you sitting down here.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here.
What is important in your view about the prosecutorial questioning that revealed some evidence today?
So I looked at this very much like a trial. I was thinking, okay, how did the prosecution do? How did the defense do? Understanding that there's a lot of things that are similar and things that are not. So one of the downsides in a trial is that you can't tell the whole story immediately. And so you sort of are playing for what's going to happen at the end when you're summing up to the jury. I don't think that is, today you needed to be able to sort of understand the whole story quickly. And so that, I think, was the challenge for the Democrats, making sure that they could tell the whole story. And
how would Andrew Weissmann tell this story in 1 to 3 sentences?
So I think that the only thing I would have done differently was the witnesses were terrific. I think that in the opening argument, so to speak, from Adam Schiff, which was excellent, I think I would have spent less time about what it meant for Ukraine and sort of American policy, and a little bit more on the fact that what the president, under his theory, was doing was cheating on our election. In other words, he wanted to be able to say that, the Bidens are under criminal investigation in the Ukraine.
Was he seeking foreign help to steal an election?
Yeah, that is what the theory of the Democrats are.
Which is something you may have some experience investigating. We're not going to get into that right now, but I want to show you a little bit of more of Goldman. As I mentioned, you're both New York prosecutors. We've cut just some of his questions, and I'm curious your honest assessment of them. Take a look.
Sure.
Have you ever seen another example of foreign aid conditioned on the personal or political interests of the President of the United States? What else was contingent on Ukraine initiating these investigations? Did Ukraine owe anything to the United States? President Trump believed that Ukraine owed him something personally. Is that accurate? The Ukrainians believed that they needed to announce these public investigations. Is that right?
What's he doing there?
Those are great. I mean, those are really terrific questions. And he also was eliciting them through witnesses who were pretty unimpeachable. These are witnesses who any fair person, somebody who's not coming at this, with a sort of preconceived notion, it's very hard to think that these witnesses were not being completely honest and have, completely bipartisan people who are not trying to shade anything. So I think those were really excellent questions. And you have to deal with each witness. You can't tell the whole story through one witness. So from getting that from the State Department witnesses was great. And also, if you're in the State Department right now, I would be feeling really terrific. I mean, these were wonderful, wonderful representatives of a really important institution.
The public are like juries because juries are made of the public.
Yep.
What do you think stands out in the presentation today that people who come to this fresh, who aren't maybe as into it, that they're going to see in the way it was presented?
I think that Ambassador Taylor hitting the theme of that there was a official and unofficial way that policy was being done, I think for a citizen set off some alarms.
Because that's obviously shady.
Yeah, I mean, it raises questions about, okay, so for the unofficial way, the next question you have is why, and what were you trying to seek?
And do you think people get at a gut level, we are actually talking about these enormous powers that we give to the United States federal government. I mean, this is a State Department story. It could easily be a Pentagon story. Ship those bombs, don't take the general's orders, take my lawyer, my friend's orders. I mean, this is kind of scary.
It is, and it's also not that complicated. I mean, this is, if you want $400 million, that's 400 million reasons to do what I'm about to tell you, or the favor that I want. If you want that, and by the way, the reason which came out loud and clear today is the reason that you want it is because it is actually going to save lives.
So the extortion case, as you say, not complicated.
Right.
The conspiracy theory is. It's complicated almost deliberately to the point that someone goes, well, it sounds like something bad happened in Ukraine, or why would there be so much smoke? And so I want to play one more thing from today that we teed up explicitly for you.
Good.
Which is, how does a prosecutor get into and how do witnesses deal with what may be propaganda or misinformation? We've done some reporting here on reports in The Hill and other places that are flatly false, Mr. Solomon's theories included. Take a look.
Through the good offices of the former mayor of New York, Yuri Lutsenko gave an interview to John Solomon, then of The Hill, in early March, and the campaign was launched on March 20th.
A corrupt Ukrainian prosecutor gave an interview to a reporter in the United States and made claims that the ambassador provided officials with a, quote, do not prosecute list. Sir, do you have any reason to believe this is true?
I have every reason to believe it is not true.
How do you deal with misinformation that is a diversion from the case you want to make?
So I think they did it very well, which is you don't want to get too distracted, but you have to deal with it. So I thought they were very good at anticipating certain distractions. And then I also thought when the Republicans made some good points, there was a real effort to give a response. So, I mean, and also they had wonderful witnesses. These are really good witnesses to take advantage of in doing that.
We're here on a big news night. You've been a part of our coverage. In all candor and sincerity, as an attorney, I can say a lot of attorneys view you as a legend. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.